If you trace the trajectory of antagonism across the decades of Jojo's bizarre adventure, you find a fascinating downward shift in scale, but an upward shift in complexity. We start in the Victorian era, with a man who rejects his humanity to become a god, and we end up in modern Hawaii with a CEO who just wants to protect his company's assets. We aren't just looking at a list of powers here, we are tracking the psychology of evil. It evolves from the desire for global conquest to the desperate need for a quiet life, and eventually to the manipulation of economic systems. But every single threat in this series, from the stone mask to the lava rocks, traces its lineage back to a rainy night in England, a carriage crash, and a young man who looked at his poverty-stricken destiny and simply refused to accept it. The first link in that chain is Dio Brando, whose rejection of humanity didn't begin with a stone mask. It began with trauma. Dio Brando does not start as a monster. He starts as a hateful, envious survivalist, born into the absolute mud of society. His father, Dario, was an abusive alcoholic who taught him that the world is a zero-sum game, where you either dominate or you die. When Dio is adopted into the Joestar manor, he doesn't view George Joestar's kindness as a blessing. He views it as a weakness to be exploited. This is the core of his psychology. He despises the aristocracy not because he wants to dismantle the system, but because he wants to be the one wearing the boot. When he puts on the stone mask, it's easy to say the artifact corrupted him, but that's incorrect. The mask didn't change his personality. It just gave him the tools to exercise his inherent cruelty without consequence. It allowed him to stop pretending. He rejects his humanity because he views humanity as limited, weak, and subservient, traits he associates with his own traumatic childhood. However, the Dio we see in Phantom Blood is reckless. He is a brute drunk on power, testing his limits. It's not until his return in Stardust Crusaders that we see his true evolution. After stealing Jonathan's body and spending a century at the bottom of the ocean, Dio evolves into a cautious, philosophical tactician. He hides in the shadows of Cairo, no longer running around shouting about ruling the world, but instead commanding a cult-like following from the dark. This shift is critical. He becomes obsessed with the concept of peace of mind. He surrounds himself with subordinates, not just for protection, but to validate his own godhood. His defining trait becomes an absolute need for control. He cannot love anyone who isn't a useful tool or a direct reflection of his own power, which is why his relationship with Pucci works. Pucci is a disciple who worships Dio's philosophy, mirroring Dio's ego back at him. Yet, the most fascinating aspect of Dio is his dynamic with Jonathan. After spending his youth tormenting his adoptive brother, Dio ultimately decides that Jonathan's body is the only vessel worthy of containing his soul. This creates a parasitic bond where the Joestar bloodline literally fuels his existence. Even a century later against Jotaro, Dio's caution, checking for a heartbeat, refusing to enter attack range, stems from a deep-seated recognition that the Joestars are the only force on Earth capable of checking his power. While Dio had to steal power through a mask, the Pillarmen were born with it. Their conflict with Joseph Joestar reveals a different philosophy of evil, not ambition, but biological supremacy. But within this group, there is a sharp philosophical divide that defines their conflict with Joseph Joestar. At the top sits Kars, a being who seeks perfection and transcendence. Kars is the creator of the stone mask, a genius who slaughtered his own race because they feared his potential. His goal is simple: to conquer the sun and become the ultimate life form. To Kars, concepts like honor, fairness, or sentimentality are evolutionary dead ends. They are hindrances to perfection. Contrast this with Wamuu, the paradox of the group, and arguably one of the most noble figures in the series. He lives by a strict warrior code. He values the sanctity of combat over his own survival. When he fights, he isn't trying to dominate for the sake of power. He is testing his existence against a worthy adversary. He even blinds himself during his chariot battle with Joseph to remove psychological weakness, proving he cares more about the purity of the duel than the guarantee of victory. Wamuu respects strength regardless of species, which is why he allows Joseph and Caesar to live to train. He wants them to be at their peak, so his victory means something. Then you have Esidisi, who is often overlooked as just the heat mode guy, but he represents the tactical bridge between Kars' ruthlessness and Wamuu's combat prowess. Esidisi is brilliant but erratic. He quotes the art of war and understands that deception is a valid tool. His emotional outbursts, where he suddenly starts sobbing uncontrollably, are actually calculated vents. He purges his stress instantly to regain laser-like laser-like focus, showing a bizarre form of emotional intelligence that keeps him level-headed when the fight actually matters. The tragedy of the Pillarman, however, is revealed the moment Kars achieves his goal. Throughout Battle Tendency, Kars carries himself with the air of a noble leader fighting for his species, but once he uses the Redstone of Aja and becomes the ultimate life form, that mask slips completely. He cheats. He attacks Joseph while his back is turned. He uses Hamon, the very energy used to hunt his kind, to mock his enemies. His pursuit was never about the elevation of his species. It was about the domination of everything that wasn't him. He becomes a creature that has all the biological data of Earth's history, but none of the spirit that allows humanity to survive against him. It is fitting, then, that he isn't defeated by a stronger punch, but by the chaotic, unpredictable nature of the Earth itself ejecting him into space, a place where biological perfection means nothing if you have nowhere to move. The Pillarmen sought to transcend humanity. The next generation of villains sought something far more unsettling, to disappear into it. Yoshikage Kira represents the horror of the mundane. He isn't seeking the throne of the world or the destruction of the sun. He is seeking a quiet life in the suburbs of Morio. But this desire creates a fascinating paradox. He wants to be an NPC in his own life, yet he is enslaved by a violent fetish that forces him to become the protagonist of a tragedy. To the outside world, Kira is a boring salaryman who meticulously files his paperwork and goes home on time. Inside, he is a man who treats severed female hands as living partners, buying them jewelry and engaging in a domestic fantasy that is fundamentally rotting. His compulsive nature, the way he tracks the growth of his fingernails to predict his own luck, or his obsession with neatness, reveals a personality desperately trying to impose order on the chaos he creates. His stand, Killer Queen, is the perfect extension of this pathology. It isn't a weapon designed for war. It is a utility for waste management, designed to vaporize the evidence of his urges so he can return to his routine without consequence. He doesn't want to fight you. He wants to delete you so he can eat his sandwich in peace. On the other side of this coin, we have Diavolo. If Kira hides in plain sight, Diavolo seeks to erase his existence entirely. As the boss of Passione, he doesn't want to be feared by name. He wants to be a ghost. Unlike Kira, who cherishes his daily routine, Diavolo views his own past as a vulnerability, a stain that must be scrubbed away to ensure his absolute safety. This paranoia is so consuming that he is willing to murder his own daughter, Trish, simply because she represents a biological link to his history. His paranoia manifests perfectly in his stand, King Crimson. The ability to skip time is really a metaphor for his refusal to accept the process of living. In the Jojo universe, the protagonists usually find strength in the journey, the path of hardship. Diavolo rejects the path entirely. He wants the result, the victory, the profit, the safety, without the cause, the struggle, or the consequences. It is the ultimate expression of a control freak who cannot handle the chaotic flow of reality. He edits the film of life to remove the scenes where he gets hit. Kira, who desperately wanted to live as a nobody, is granted that wish in the cruelest way possible. He dies a mundane, accidental death, run over by an ambulance like a common traffic statistic. Fate treats him with the indifference he craved. Diavolo, who tried to bypass the process of reality to reach the peak of eternity, is punished with Gold Experience Requiem's infinite death loop. He is trapped in a state where he can never reach the result of death, forced to experience the process of dying forever. The man who erased time is trapped in it, while the man who wanted to be unnoticed is exposed to the light. Kira and Diavolo wanted to escape the world. The next villains wanted to rebuild it entirely. These men are terrifying not because they are unstable, but because they are absolutely convinced they are the heroes of the story. With Pucci, we see the ultimate corruption of faith. While he wears the vestments of a priest, he isn't serving a traditional god. He is serving Dio's specific, twisted vision of heaven. This isn't a paradise in the clouds, but a mechanical restructuring of reality itself. Pucci's philosophy hinges on the concept of gravity, which in the Jojo universe is synonymous with fate. He believes that the source of all human suffering is the unknown. If you don't know a tragedy is coming, you cannot prepare for it, and that ignorance breeds despair. This worldview wasn't formed in a vacuum. It was born from the trauma of his sister, Perla. Through a series of misunderstandings and coincidences, fate working against him, him, Pucci inadvertently caused the death of the sister he tried to protect. This broke him. He decided that a world where tragic accidents happen without warning is a flawed world. His solution is Made in Heaven, a stand capability designed to accelerate time to the end of the universe and reset it. In this new world, every living being would subconsciously know their entire future. They would know exactly when they would fall in love, when they would get sick, and the exact moment they would die. To Pucci, this is peace of mind. He forces the entire human race to accept a deterministic script so that no one ever has to feel the pain of surprise again. He views Jolene Cujo not as a rival, but as a nuisance, a fly buzzing against the windshield of destiny. Shift universes to Steel Ball Run, and you find a man who wants to control fate rather than submit to it. Funny Valentine is the President of the United States, and he is arguably the most noble villain in terms of intent. He doesn't want to reset the universe. He wants to secure absolute prosperity for his country. His goal is to gather the parts of the Holy Corpse to create a metaphysical barrier around America, one that deflects all misfortune to other parts of the world. He is essentially weaponizing luck, ensuring that while the rest of the globe suffers famine and war, the United States enjoys an eternal golden age. Valentine justifies this through his napkin theory. He posits that society is defined by who takes the first napkin at a dinner table. Once someone sets the rules, everyone else must follow. Valentine believes he has the moral right and the duty to take that first napkin for his people. This conviction allows him to commit horrific acts without blinking. He murders his own subordinates, betrays allies, and attempts to assault Lucy Steele, all while maintaining a clear conscience because he views these as necessary sacrifices for the greater good. The dynamic between villain and hero flips here. In Stone Ocean, Jolene fights for the freedom to navigate an unknown future, battling Pucci's enforced destiny. In Steel Ball Run, the dynamic is even more complex. Johnny Joestar is driven by a selfish desire to reclaim his ability to walk. He is essentially fighting for himself. Valentine, conversely, is fighting for the happiness of millions. He views Johnny not just as an enemy, but as a rival for the moral high ground, genuinely believing that his patriotism justifies crushing a selfish cripple. Pucci wants everyone to accept their fate. Valentine wants to steal the world's fortune and hoard it for his own borders. They are men who looked at the chaos of the world and decided that the only way to fix it was to force everyone else to play by their rules. Pucci and Valentine believed they could save humanity. In JoJolion and the JoJo Lands, the villains have stopped caring about humanity altogether. We leave behind the men who wanted to save or destroy the world and meet the entities who simply want to exploit it. Tooru represents a biological divergence from humanity that is genuinely unsettling. As a rock human, his psychology is fundamentally alien. He lacks the capacity for empathy that defined even the most twisted humans like Pucci. Tooru views human beings essentially as hornets, part of the ecosystem, industrious, perhaps dangerous in a swarm, but ultimately a lower life form to be utilized. He doesn't hate you, he just doesn't care if you exist, provided you don't interrupt his flow. This detachment is perfectly mirrored in his stand, Wonder of You. This is arguably the most terrifying ability in the franchise because it isn't a combat ability. It is the weaponization of logic itself. Wonder of You manipulates calamity, ensuring that anyone who harbors the intent to pursue Tooru is met with disproportionate, fatal misfortune. If you think about chasing him, you trip over a chair and shatter your neck. If you try to attack him, a plane door falls from the sky and crushes you. It represents the inevitability of misfortune. Unlike Dio, who you can punch if you are strong enough, or Valentine, who you can debate ethically, Tooru is a force of nature. You cannot fight a landslide, and you cannot fight the logic of the universe. He turns the protagonist's own determination into their executioner. Tooru represents nature's indifference to human ambition. Acca Howler represents something more modern, the indifference of systems. If Tooru was a monster hiding in the medical industry, Howler is the industry itself. He represents a massive departure from the hidden boss trope established by Diavolo. Howler is a public-facing CEO who flaunts his wealth, flies on private jets with models, and treats his power as a status symbol rather than a dark secret. He is the first major villain who is dangerous not just because he has a stand, but because he has a legal team and property rights. Howler's psychology is defined by narcissism and the accumulation of assets. He views the lava rocks, mystical items capable of manipulating value, not as a path to spiritual godhood like cars, but as a copyrightable asset to secure his financial monopoly. This introduces the central theme of Part 9, Mechanisms. In this era, the villain isn't fighting for a philosophy, he is fighting for control over the systems of capital and flow. Howler understands that true power in the modern world isn't about stopping time, it's about owning the land where time passes. He is a villain who operates within the boundaries of the law when it suits him and ignores them when he can buy his way out. The fascinating vulnerability here is that because Howler operates within the public system, he has weaknesses that Dio or Cars never had. He is susceptible to bankruptcy, he fears government investigation, he worries about the liquidity of his assets. We have moved from battles that are decided by who has the stronger spirit to battles that are decided by who controls the infrastructure. Howler represents the banality of modern evil. It doesn't wear a stone mask or hide in a coffin. It wears a tailored suit, files for initial public offerings, and destroys lives through the indifferent machinery of corporate greed. He is the ultimate realization that the systems we live under can be more hostile than any vampire. While the scale of the threat has shifted from the destruction of the world to the manipulation of its economic laws, the core danger remains identical. Whether it is Dio rejecting his humanity or Howler rejecting the rules of fair play, the villain is always an individual who believes their desires override the natural order. They are the ones who try to swim upstream against the flow of reality, only to be washed away by those who accept the journey. If you enjoyed this analysis of the JoJo villains, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the lore.